before we get into kind of talking about the control panel and management review, I just want to remind everyone how you create the control panels. When you're on your home screen, if you haven't done, I'm just going to remove these control panels that I've got going on here, just so we can kind of start blank. If you haven't set up control panels for your users, then when you log in, it's going to look like this. So here we've got nothing in the control panel section, and you don't even see the management review area. So when you log in, or if any of your employees log in, and you haven't set all this up, this is what it's going to look like. So all you do is simply go to Account Administration, choose the person's name from the user list that you want to create a control panel for, go over here to the Control Panel button, and then you're going to see the organization chart in Simple View. So this will be your organization chart. So then you just want to choose the control panels that this position or this person fills or needs. So when assigning a control panel, you want to think, what position does this person fill on the org chart? What is their job? So I'm going to choose this one, Manager of Marketing and Sales. Then it's going to ask me, is this a managerial position or a staff position? Usually I know because it's got positions underneath it on the org chart, or it says it in the title. So this is a managerial position, so I'm going to choose this. By choosing manager, this is going to give this user a management review for the positions underneath them on the org chart. And that's what this little paragraph says. Update. So now I've got a control panel for this position. You can assign multiple control panels. So if I'm the manager of marketing and sales, but then maybe I also am a salesperson at times because the company doesn't have enough business or enough resources that I can be a full-time manager, then I can give myself a control panel for a salesperson as well. Update. So now you see I've got two control panels here. So now when we go over here to the home screen, you're going to see this control panels appear in this control panel view. And then in management review, you see all of the users that have been set up with control panels that are underneath me on the organization chart. So I'm the manager of marketing and sales. These positions, these four, are underneath me on the org chart. And these people here, these actual employees, have control panels for these positions above. So Sam, Mike, and Bill all have a salesperson's control panel. And because I'm the manager of the sales, then I see them here in management review. So let's talk for a minute about the purpose of the control panel in management review, and then we'll go into each one, and I'll kind of give you the details of how to use it and then some tips and techniques for using it. So the purpose of these two tools overall is to ensure that processes get implemented and used and managed and innovated ultimately. So it's the using of the processes which allows you to get the benefit of the processes. It's the using of the processes that teaches employees and shows managers how that process works. So implementing them, using them, and managing them becomes key to their success, really, the processes. If you just documented and even organized everything over here on with these two tools inside your system, but then never really took steps to implement the processes, train the employees in them, and then ultimately make sure that they were using them, management, then slowly over time your processes will just kind of fall apart. And people will start saying, well, I know that process is in TouchStone, but nobody's really using it. I don't think it's current anymore. Or, yeah, maybe that process is in TouchStone. I'm not really sure where it is or if anyone's using it. So even though you may go through all the effort of putting the processes in TouchStone, it still will fall apart over time if they're not implemented and used. So the ideal situation for an ongoing successful process-dependent business is for processes to be documented here with these tools, documented, implemented here, employees trained in them, taught them, employees following them, and then managed and innovated here in management review. When a manager decides something needs to change, it needs to be innovated, then we go back here to the documentation. So it's a circle. Document here, implement, manage and innovate, and then back to document. When we document, then we train and we see what's going to go right and what's going to go wrong, how it could be better. Managers review that. They see how employees are using them, what needs to change, how they can improve, and then they go back to documenting. And then once they've innovated something, then they have to implement again and then go back to innovation and back to documenting. So it's this continuous quality control or quality assurance process that goes in a circle all the time. Now, process innovation is not something that you say, okay, every January we're going to innovate all our processes in TouchStone. We're going to review them and make sure they're all current. I've seen people do that, but it really kind of misses the point. The point being that innovation should be constant. If a manager is really looking at a process, a documented process, and making sure that the employees are using it and seeing what needs to be better about it, they're going to notice those things real time. They're going to see them. They're going to be communicating about it with these people here. And then they're going to decide, let's make this tweak and change, or this whole thing is changing, let's redo it. That doesn't happen every January. It happens all throughout the year. And if you wait till January, what you're going to get is a bunch of outdated things that nobody uses until January comes around, and then we try to, innovate them all. So this innovation cycle with processes should be this consistent flow that's always happening. The manager's primary responsibility is to manage processes by which people get results. It's a whole different management philosophy than most managers are used to. Their responsibility is to manage the processes by which the employees get the results. They don't manage people and all of their inconsistencies and personalities. They manage the process, and they teach the employees the process, which is meant to be a holistic, efficient, wonderful thing in the end that all employees learn to kind of follow and use, and it makes everyone better. So if it's a manager's responsibility to manage processes and processes alone, then their work is all about the analyzing and the innovating of those processes and the using of them with the employees, by which the employees become successful, fulfilled, educated, happy, ultimately, satisfied. So employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, it's all wrapped up in the manager having this primary focus of making sure that the processes are the best that they can be. So if you're going to have a successful process-dependent business, if you're a manager on the phone right now and you want to be and learn how to be an effective manager and how to learn to love management and not hate it, then this is an avenue for you. Think about how to manage processes. So as we get into the functionality of the control panel management review, I'm going to continue to make this point. How does a manager manage an employee with processes? So this is called a control panel, and when I click on this control panel, it takes me to a list of my processes. So this is the Manager of Marketing and Sales control panel. And here I'm seeing a list of processes. These processes that are listed here are all derived from the job description. So whatever processes are put on the Manager of Marketing and Sales job description right here are going to be the same processes that appear in the control panel. So here is the job description. These are all the processes that have been linked to it. These processes are all the responsibility of that managerial position. And when I go here and a control panel is assigned for that position and I select it, I see those very same processes. So let me make it really clear. So here's this position. If I go add existing process, just go into a random subfunction here and just adding this accounts payable process. I've just added it to this job description. See it right here. Now if I go back to the home screen and to this control panel, boom, I'm going to see that process. So all of the processes here are controlled in a sense by the job description. And when you add them and remove them from that job description, then you will see them appear. The reason that this looks a little different than a job description is because I'm able to create these work groups. So it's not just strategic and tactical, which is how the job description is organized, just two sections, strategic and tactical. Instead of that, I have this ability to create more succinct work groups. So all of that happens right here under Organized Processes. So if I go Create Group, and I type in the name of my group and save it, then TouchStone's going to create a new group, which is down here at the bottom. So what the purpose of the groups is to organize these processes into kind of succinct, usable sections. So you can create groups that are subject dependent, like this one, recruiting and hiring new employees. So everything related to recruiting and hiring is under here. Recruiting, hiring, compensation plan, new employee onboarding. Here's one that's even more generic than that, management work. So I'm a manager, and all the work I do as a manager is here in this management list. You can do it by timing, like here's end of the month, and you put everything in that you do at the end of the month. You can do beginning of the month. I've seen control panels for kind of rudimentary time-sensitive positions where the control panel groups are like 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and then the things that that person at 8, 9, and 10 are inside of those groups. So either think about it by timing or by subject area. For managerial positions and sometimes finance positions, having the timing groups works well because you can say they are kind of like that work can be dependent upon the time of the month that it's done. So you can do by the 15th, end of the month, beginning of the month. You can, if you want to, organize it by actions. So like you can create a group and call it checklists and then put all the checklists or every process that has checklist in it that has to be completed all the time into a group. You can have a group called Not Completed Yet. You see this one down here? This is kind of a useful thing because sometimes you're building processes for the future. So you're putting in ideas for processes that you want to build someday or hopefully in the not too distant future. But it's not documented yet. Nobody can use it yet, really. It's not ready to be implemented. So that process can still sit on a job description. In fact, it needs to, but you don't want it kind of in the way of all the regular work that needs to go on. So you can create a group and kind of move it down to the bottom and call it Not Completed Yet. And then the employee knows to just not go there until that's documented and ready to be used. I've seen groups for processes where, say you've got 4 salespeople, and they all do the same work, but because of timing, some come in the morning and some come in the evening. And so in the evening, you need the evening people to do the closeout things, and the people who come in the morning do the opening things. All that work is on this job description. So how you can deal with that is here in the control panel. This one's for salesperson. You can put, morning shift, and then for the actual person who has this control panel, you can move all the work related to the evening shift down to the bottom and say for evening shift only or do not use. And then what the morning shift people see is just what they're primarily responsible for. This is also a good technique where you've got daily things. So these are the things I do every day. And then on-demand things. So those are things that I may or may not do. If someone asks me to do them, then I do them. If the need arises, then I do it. If I need to find it for whatever reason, it's there, but it's not something I do all the time. So you just kind of create a group around this and then throw it to the bottom of the control panel. I've also seen groups, I don't think I have an example written out, related to like reference material. Sorry, my phone cut out there for a second. So you can have a group and you call it reference material, and then inside of that group you put processes that are like just resources. So reference material or resources, and then you take those processes and put them into that group, and it could be things like that I don't need to see all the time, that I've already been trained in, but if I need to reference it because I've forgotten something or I need a form out of it, then I can go to that group and kind of find that information. Okay, so let's go back to this control panel. So under this organized processes, you can create groups, you can edit groups that you've already created, you can delete groups, you can reorder them, and then here's where you move processes around the groups. So everything will be on the default list, like right here. So this process here is on the default list. This process just hasn't been moved into a group yet. That's why it's still listed here. So you can go move processes, and you see a list of all the processes. You choose the process that you want to move. I'm going to take this recruiting one and move it to the group, select, and then hit move. Now you'll see it's taken it out of this recruiting and hiring and moved it into here. So at some point soon, actually, this is going to be all drag and drop. But for now, move processes, choose process you want to move, and hit move. The processes really only have to be organized once unless major changes happen. So it's kind of a methodical thinking through what's the best way to see these things. The manager could get involved in doing it to kind of help with that. Every user, even though they have the same control panel, like these three people, they can all organize their groups differently. So in case I didn't make that point, each of these people can choose different groups, different subjects for their groups, or you can require them to all have the same groups. So it's flexible. You can do it by position. So when I go to the control panel, what I'm actually doing here is I'm accessing these processes and I'm using them. So there's nothing that can be edited or changed in terms of the content of the process. So let's go to this performance review process. So these are all the tools that have been built inside this process. Here I'm just seeing copies of those original tools that were built. So these are work plans, and I know because of the icons. This is a checklist, uploaded files, here's a form, here's a policy note. When I select a work plan, I'm seeing a copy of it. So this is the actual work plan tasks that were created over here on the process tools page through the 4 functions. Here I'm just looking at the content. So remember, you can't edit or change anything here. No employee can. Even if they're administrators, they can't go into the control panel and edit and change things. Here's just where I'm seeing copies of what was originally built. If I go to this process, the employee performance review process, through the 4 functions list here, or through a job description, and I have the right access, I can edit and change it there, and then it automatically changes it here instantly. The minute you save, it's instantly changed, the content here in the control panels. So you use the control panel when you want to complete something. An employee uses the control panel to remind themselves of how to do it. They use a control panel to be trained in a process, to access that process, see what the content is. A manager opens it up with them and they walk through it together for training. A manager points back to it and says, you know, go back to the employee performance review checklist because I saw you didn't complete it the last time this review that I'm looking at. So just go back and review it. So the manager uses the control panel to reference ongoing training things, but most importantly, an employee uses it to complete that process. Now for work plans in the control panel, usually these are just looked at by an employee. I might look at this. In fact, I did this the other day. I looked at the work plan just to remind myself how to do the review because I kind of, it's been a year. I haven't thought about it in a while. So I just literally glanced through the steps and said, okay, right, I remember now. There are some work plans where it's useful for management purposes to see that the employee has looked at it or done it. So in that case, you just hit this little save button and then it date and time stamps the work plan. There's also the Save As field and the Notes field that can be completed. So I just saved this. That's all I did. Then I go back here, and then it's just saved an instance of this. And I see these different dates where I've completed this work plan. So a performance review work plan is probably not all that necessary to see that somebody has looked at it or completed it. But I saw a process the other day where I thought it was pretty clever the way that they were doing it. It was like a customer greeting process. So this was like there was a receptionist or admin person, and people would come in and get things from her. And so what the manager wanted to know is how many times this was happening. And so it was a very simple thing. All she did was go to the work plan, hit it, and save it, and then go back and hit it and save it. And then what the manager could do is they could go here, complete a folder, and see how many times in a day, a week, a month that that person actually performed this work. Someone's saying they've lost the sound. Do other people hear me okay? Just type in the chat log if you can hear me. So, Judy, it might just be you. Other people can hear me. Let me just send her a quick message. Anyone else can't hear me, go ahead and type it into the chat log. Okay, so we'll go ahead and keep going. Oh, it looks like she's back. All right, so what I was talking about was completing of work plans and the need for that. I'd say 9 times out of 10 there's not really a need for it, but there might be some situations where you're collecting statistics. It's just good for a manager to know that the person did that 5 times in a day, but they don't really need like a full-blown checklist for it, or they don't need a full-blown form. You're just curious, how many times did she do that, or did that happen? A tool that is readily used in the control panel is the checklist tool. And I know there's a checklist in here because of this icon. I can see it. So when I select this checklist, then I can literally go through and fill it out as I do the work. So that's the benefit of this electronic way of using a checklist in the control. I can say, once I save this, a date and time stamps it automatically. But here in the Save As, I can always put in a name, like in this example, the name of the employee. I can always put in notes if I want to remind myself of what happened during this, or I want my manager to know something, and then I would go and save it. So now TouchStone's put this sample checklist, or this completed checklist, into the completed folder right here. And I can see all these checklists over time that I've completed for performance reviews. So this is an electronic way to access checklists and fill them out and save them. Here's an uploaded file. So this is a performance review form. And in the control panel, I can hit View File. And now TouchStone's going to launch this review form. And I can open it up, and here it is. So I then complete this for the employee. Then I go File, Save As. I close it, and then I go back to TouchStone. I hit Choose File, find the review form that I saved, and then save it. So now I've taken this edited file or form, this completed form, and I've saved it back to TouchStone. So if we go back here and to this completed folder again, you see these different uploaded files. If I want to go back to this and see it, I just hit Go, and then I hit View File. It's going to show me this completed file, you might say, the one that I've added information to. If I want a blank copy again, I just hit the title one more time, and now I've got a blank review form that I can fill out one more time. So the Uploaded Files tool, I think, is underutilized in the control panel. I think it's a very cool thing that you can use to save information, save files, save completed things. So spreadsheets that you fill out. If you fill one out for a month, you fill one out for a year, you can save it all in the control panel. If it's a one-time use spreadsheet that's filled out, you can save it back, and then every time you access it again and fill it out again. If it's a complicated form or something that needs to be in Word for whatever reason, you can access that and then save it. If I have a rolling file where it's a spreadsheet and someone adds numbers to it every month for a whole year, all I would do is go to the completed folder and find it each time. Access it, go, I hit view file, I look at it, I add more information to it, I re-upload it and save it, and then I go back the next day when I want to add more information to it. I don't go here because I'll get a copy of the master. I go here, back to it, hit go, and I see that same file over and over again that I'm adding information to. I think it's a great use. This uploaded file is a great use, is used well when even you have to have signatures on files. So if I access this performance review form and I hit view file, it's downloading it in Word. Then I open it and I can fill it out. But if at the bottom page I need an employee to sign it, once it's filled out, I can print it out. I have them sign it on this page here. Then I save it as a PDF. So you can scan it back in as a PDF, or you can open it in Word and then save it as a PDF. Usually you're scanning it back in, at least the signature field. Then I go back to TouchStone, I hit choose file, and I find that PDF. So even though the original file is a Word document, TouchStone doesn't care. This is a PDF, I hit open, and then I save it. So now I've saved this signed, completed version of this file back to TouchStone in PDF format. And when I go back here to the completed folder, if I ever want to see that copy, then I go to it. Now there's two because one's a PDF version and one was the original version. I could have put that in the Save As too, and it would have appeared here. Then I can view and see that file. So contracts, you can do that with contracts. You save them all back, or you can do it with any documents that you want signed. The form tool in the control panel is pretty cool because it opens right like that, and you can then fill out these forms. These are all live. So when you have the option of having a tool be a form as opposed to an uploaded file, so if it's a simple Word document like this one that I just fill out, it doesn't do any calculations, it doesn't have links to one thing or another, then I can put it in the form tool, and then boom, with one click I see it, I fill it out and save it. So when it's in the form tool, it doesn't have to be this, loading and reloading of the document, which takes a few extra steps. It can just be simply a form that's filled out. When there's a policy note in a process, I think it's great to have an employee go in and say, read and agree. So you then save this, and I see at this time that this employee has read and agreed to this policy. And as a manager, I can look at that, and if there's ever an issue with the policy or with the employee, I've got, this loose evidence that they've actually agreed to that policy. And I don't know that this would stand up in court. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but that's not the point. The point is that the manager has an acknowledgement that the employee has read it. So when we go to sit and talk about this, we don't have to talk about, well, I didn't get it, and maybe I saw it, and I don't remember. It's here, and so the conversation can go beyond that. So using of all these tools, first of all, it helps the employee to be focused on it. They see it, they read it, they know they have to concentrate on it. They're not just going to, oh, I was trained in that, and then try to make it up. You're wanting kind of evidence that they've actually followed it and done it. And you get that by having them save it and store it back to these completed folders. We're going to talk about what this trained area means when we get to management review, but I just want to point this out. This date will always show you when the process tool was last updated. So that's an interesting thing because I can see, when somebody changed it. If you're implementing the archive feature, theoretically, If it's been edited or changed, you can always go back into the archive and from that, beyond that, or before this date to see what it used to look like. So if you have a rule with your employees who have create access that if they're going to change something, they need to archive the original first and then change it, then if a manager sees that it's been changed and they're going, well, wonder what she changed, nobody talked about that, they can always go back and view the archive and see what was changed. So here on the control panel, there are things in the control panel that you probably wouldn't have people completing, which is fine. I think sometimes people look at this and say, well, we wouldn't do that for this position or this process, but what they're not looking at is what you should do it for. So if you're struggling to say, how would we do this inside of TouchStone, or we already have a system that does that, then let that process go. But do focus on what you could use, because the value of it is that the employee is focused on the documentation. They're looking at it. And I don't think there's many tools out there where it's forcing someone to review the documentation and go right into a checklist or a form or completing something as proof that they've actually reminded themselves of the process or that they're using the process. So whatever processes that's possible for, then I would encourage people to use them. So one area of processes that I think without a doubt this is useful for is management things. Recruiting and hiring, interviewing. So here inside of this interviewing process, for example, there's all these worksheets on behavioral interviewing, defining skill sets. There is the actual score sheets where you're scoring employees on, on the interview itself. When I'm doing interviews, I got this open with my iPad, and I'm typing right into it inside of TouchStone. Because I think it's essential that when you're doing an interview to make notes, especially if you're asking complicated questions. And I tell the prospect that in the beginning. So this stuff is all great. What's an added benefit to it is I can complete all of these things and save them back. And then if my manager wants to know what is she doing about hiring that new person, they can go and look in TouchStone. They don't have to bother me. They can go look in TouchStone and see what I'm doing about it. Interviewing or recruiting, which I moved that process, is the same idea. You can put in ads that you're going to write, ads that you've placed, the amount of prospects that came from each ad. So all that information can be saved back here to the control panel and then accessed if someone wants to know what's happening. So managerial things, any kind of key performance indicator things, financial things, so budgets, key performance indicators, department indicators, department objectives, company-wide objectives. Any information like that is great in the control panel, because if I'm a manager and I'm required to evaluate my key indicators every month, I do it right here in TouchStone. In fact, this doesn't even need a date in it, because the minute I save it, it's going to date and timestamp it and let me know what the date is. So all of this can be created, saved back to TouchStone, and then when my manager or my boss says, I wonder what the indicators were last month, rather than me having to email that person a spreadsheet that it then creates an additional copy of that spreadsheet, then gets lost in that person's email, then has to be filed in some file folder that no one can ever find again, instead of that, it's here in TouchStone, the most current version of the form, and every time it's filled out. And if the manager wants to see it, they simply run a report, which I'll show you the functionality of this in a second. So any kind of quantification, strategies, those kinds of processes and tools. If you don't have a CRM, then sales information is great. Number of follow-up appointments that were made and what the result was, what the sales calls were and what the result was. So all of those can be kept in forms or at least saved back to TouchStone. Bookkeeping type things. So accounts payable, receivable, if there's reports that have to be run, those can be then uploaded back to TouchStone in the Uploaded Files tool. Here's this accounts payable process. These are all work plans. But one technique I've seen that's been great for like when a manager wants to report on with a spreadsheet on specific things like accounts payable listing or accounts receivable listing, you can create an uploaded file inside of a process over here, and you can call it accounts payables report. And then you upload a document to it. It can be like a sample spreadsheet or even a blank spreadsheet. And so then what that creates is a placeholder for that report. And then all the bookkeeper does is go to that process or go to that process tool in the control panel, the uploaded file. They hit that browse button and they upload that month's payable report. Let's see what else. Operational type things. If you don't have a production process system, or you don't have something that employees can access in the field to complete checklists or provide evidence that certain steps have been followed on a project, all that kind of stuff is great inside of the control panel. All right, let's go back to the home screen. So if employees are digging into the control panel and they're filling out tools, they're marking things as complete, they're providing evidence of the work that they've done, they're training using the documentation, then a manager has to review all that. That's why it's called management review. So a manager has to, number one, make sure that they're doing it, look at it, and number two, and make sure that the employees continue to be trained in all the processes, whether it be in the beginning during new employee training or if it's ongoing training. If a manager doesn't have any evidence, statistics, verification that work is being done, the only way they know is to walk around and look, which is very limiting, or wait until there's a problem. Now, they may see the successes by having happy customers and sales coming in, but they don't really know if the employees are how they're really doing it. So they may see those successes. They may be able to watch as they walk around. But the only other real way that they know is when there's a problem, when there's an issue. And then it becomes apparent that somebody didn't do it, didn't follow the process. So what managers need is they need tools to allow them to see what employees are doing without over micromanaging people, without feeling so out of control with what everyone's doing. When somebody's busy, they usually tend to kind of leave the people they think are okay alone and then focus on the problems. So a lot of times all a manager is doing is kind of dealing with problems, and there's not a whole lot of time to kind of look at the people who may be doing the work and help them to be better. So the point I'm making is that the tools in TouchStone, the tools in these processes can help managers get this information. So if you look at the control panel and ask your employees, do you want to do this? Do you think this is going to be useful? You're usually going to get a no, because they're thinking this is just another thing we have to do. The better question to ask is to ask the managers. Ask your managers, would it be useful for you to have a checklist of what the salespeople have done every week? Would it be useful for you to be able to go and review all the HR forms so that you can see what potential employees have responded to the ads? Would it be useful for you to be able to see all the customer service issues that happened that month and then review them? If the answer is yes, then that lets you know that having people complete things in the control panel is a good idea. So for this position, for example, customer service, this person does complaints, the intake process, client satisfaction. Let's just think about these three processes alone. if Mary is going in and filling out every customer complaint form and checklist, and every time she does an intake, she's filling out a checklist for the separate steps that were followed, and then maybe uploading the spreadsheet with all the clients, what they were promised, what the project was, details of the project, conversations she's had with the handoff. If she's uploaded documents on client satisfaction and what clients were happy with and what they weren't, how many people she called, when she called them, people she has still to call. If all this information is here in TouchStone, if I'm her manager, I can go here and see what she's done. If it's not all done in TouchStone or in some other place, I have to go ask Mary. So how many complaints did we get, and what did you do with them? And she's kind of fumbling through, trying to remember. So this intake process didn't go well with client number 1 because he says that he didn't get his documents in time. And she says, well, yeah, I sent it to him. I have an email right here. Or this client, certain client called me and said that he never got his client satisfaction call. Well, and then Mary says, well, yeah, I gave it to him. So this kind of management is relying on Mary's memory, making her defensive, and making it difficult for the manager because because nothing's concrete. So if it's all in TouchStone, then I can go look at it in TouchStone as a manager. And then I can come back to her and say, you didn't do the checklist for this intake process, and this step was missed. So let's talk about it. How did that happen? This was the impact of it. So what can we do about it now to make it better? Or I was looking at your client satisfaction reports in TouchStone the other day. That's fantastic. You did 10 calls in one day. It was this result. I'm super glad that you did that. It's great. It's great for the company. So it gives me opportunities to look at something concrete, give her feedback, and help her. So that's one of the cases I think can be made for why to complete things in a control panel. So let's talk about using management review. So there's generally, a couple reasons or results that a manager can get from going into management review. The number one has to do with new employee training. So if I go here to Mary and I've just hired her, I can see here in her control panel, these are the specific groups, what she needs to be trained in. And as new employee onboarding, I can talk to her and say, okay, well, we're going to handle all the customer service things here. I think I can train you in those in about 2 weeks. So we're going to go through these first. Then we're going to go into your weekly things. And this is going to take about a month for me to train you in all of these. And then we're going to talk about these on-demand things. Then you also need an overview of the public processes because these are all resources that you can go to and things that you need to use. So this tells me, what her training is, and in a certain degree, it shows me the path that she's going to go down to learn and be trained in her position. So I start in on the first day. We're going to start by teaching you the customer complaint process. And check that. So here, these are all the processes. This is the documented process. Let's go through and talk about it. So we review each one. We talk about the work plan. We talk about the checklist. Maybe if there's video or audio files in here, she reads them. I go to each one of these processes, and when I'm training her, I can make training notes. That's what the notes section is for. So here's Mary. I can just save this, and it date and time stamps it and lets me know that this is, if anyone goes back and looks at it, that this is when she was trained. I can make notes right here as to certain things she was trained in or issues we're still having. All of these training notes and information are kept here in this trained folder, so I can review and access them later. If I go here and all I did was save that, then anybody can see, and I can also see that she was trained in this process on this date. So that's one of the benefits of just selecting the tool and hitting save, because then it goes and stores that in the trained folder. When I'm happy with her training, I can go and flip these train flags one at a time. So now she's been trained in this work plan. Or if it's a quick process and I train her all at once in a few days or in one day, I can fill in this flag that says trained all process tools, and then she's got check marks. So for new employee training, it's this methodical process of going one process at a time, discussing each of the tools, doing role plays, giving her tests. For scripts, I think these kind of role play tests are great. So I would say the prompt. So you're in a situation where the client is going to tell you what their complaint is. How do you deal with that? What do you say? And then she, without looking, has to say, I hear what you're saying. How can I help you? And then I would say, would you ever interrupt them for any reason while they're saying that? And she would say, no. So we do this kind of, what does she remember? Let's do a real-life situation and see and practice it. I might say to her after she's been trained, when do you complete the customer processing handling checklist? Under what situation? I might say, here's a scenario of a customer complaint. Fill out the client service action form based on this situation. So she'd go here to TouchStone, she'd have to go through and actually fill the form out, and then I'd look at it and see if she did it correctly. So the training of these processes and also the verification or the testing they actually know how to do them can all happen through management review using the documentation itself. And then I keep evidence of the dates that she was trained and then actually flag that she passed the test and she's ready to do this work. So new employee training, it's a great way, the control panel itself and also management review is a great way to ensure that employees are trained in all their processes. I can also use the management review area for ongoing training. So one of the best things I think for keeping processes innovated is to have like a process of the month or a process of the week for every department. So in the client service department, we might say, okay, this month the client complaints process is going to be our process of the month. And so what people understand about that is that they want to study it, look at it, think about how they've used it over the last month or when's the last time we talked about it, review the documentation. You might want them to even go into that process and make notes inside of the notes field of tools that they think could be improved. So what that looks like is like a salesperson would go through the control panel, they'd go to customer complaints, and maybe they think to themselves, since this is the process of the month, I really think this form has some issues. I'd like to see X, Y, and Z fields in it. So they put those notes here, and then they can put a look at this to their manager if they want, so it stands out, and then they hit save, and now that's saved back to TouchStone. This is a great kind of concept for scripts. So as someone's using a script, if they see, maybe there's a frequently asked question that isn't on here, or there's the flow of it doesn't seem to work right, they can put that note directly into the notes field and then do, a look at this, and then they save it, and it saves back to TouchStone. What this is doing is it's saving information about innovations that could be great for the process. And then a manager can run a report and see those things. They'll see the list of, look at this, and they can go and look at it and review it. So if this is the process of the month, that customer complaint process, people spend a few weeks focusing on this as they do it. Then we all get together in the department meeting, which maybe happens once a month or once a week, depending on what your business is about. And then we talk about it. We spend maybe 15 minutes just discussing it. Maybe a half an hour would be even better. Even if everyone decides in the end, this is an awesome process, it still works, we don't need to make any changes, what you've accomplished is you've focused everybody on it. And you've made them understand that it is important. You've innovated this process, not in January, but every month, or every time it rolls around, or every time it's necessary. Better yet, the service department has come up with great ideas on how to make it better. So they've come up with, they've focused on what did they do that month, or what are the points of failure within it? How could it be better? Oftentimes what comes of this too is that the employees focusing on their process can also see where another department's process isn't working well and is causing their process not to work well. So in this example of customer complaints, maybe at some point they have to pass, after it's gone through the process, they have to pass that complaint off to a manager to deal with. And then maybe the managerial process for this is not going well. So all the service people are saying, if they did their part, our part would be so much better. So it's seeing the connections in the processes, because then you go to the next process and make that more efficient. So this kind of process kind of helps to keep processes relevant and up to date. Also for ongoing training, you run across issues that employees are having. So for like 3 salespeople, for example, they're all existing employees, they've all been trained in their processes, but for whatever reason, Sam and Mike have a conversion rate of like 85%, whereas Bill's is 30%. They're all using the same sales process, they're all doing needs assessment in the same way, they're all doing their follow-ups, and I know that because I've looked at it and I can see that Bill's doing it in the same way these 2 people are. Usually the thought for a sales manager is, well, Sam and Mike are just better. But ongoing training with real processes can be really effective to help Bill become better. So we sit with Bill and we say, okay, let's go through the needs assessment process. Let's talk about how you do it. Let's listen to some recordings. The manager can use the process to try to understand what is Bill, how is he not using it effectively, and or is he not following it completely, or why isn't it working for him in the way that it's working for the other 2? So either through looking at it in a very objective way, looking at the needs-based selling process, really talking to Bill about the closing script, all the assessment questions, how is he doing this, and figuring out where he's losing people. It's a much different conversation when you're focused on managing the process by which Bill gets the results. If the process didn't exist, or Bill wasn't, or nobody was following it, as a sales manager, I can't really help Bill in a tangible way. I can get mad at him, I can nitpick him, I can try to help him. Most of the time I get frustrated because I'm trying to manage him, and the tendency there is to blame him. So with this other approach where the manager is managing the process for ongoing training and making employees better, I have something very tangible to work with Bill and figure out what is really going on. Now in the end, it might be very clear that it was a mishire. He's not good for this position. It's not working out for him. But by managing him in this way through the process, I'm going to find that out in pretty short order, which is useful as well, because another consequence of no documentation or documentation that isn't managed is that Bill just lags along for years and years. Nobody really notices. Nobody really cares. We're paying him for work that is not efficient or productive, and he's actually costing the business money. But nobody wants to fire him because there's so many sales calls coming in and there's not enough people to do them. So hopefully the result is that Bill becomes better and that his conversion rate increases, or the other result is that he's is not a good fit. So in this management review area, the idea is to use it for training, new employee ongoing training, and verifying that employees are actually following and doing the work. The manager can get information from this area about each employee, track that they're following things, review checklists that they're supposed to be completing, whether there's a problem or not, they should be reviewing to see that they're done. They can track the training information within here, remember when they were trained, or when they trained the employee and how. And most importantly, use it for innovation. Use it for all of the reasons I just stated, with the ultimate goal being in making employees better and making the processes better. Now in the few minutes I have left, I just want to talk about this reports tool. So the report tool allows you to take a magnifying glass into a control panel or in through management review to employees' control panels. So this is a control panel report. And if I wanted to look to see what I had completed in my own control panel, this is where I'd go to do it. So here I've got two control panels. So you want to make sure that you choose the one that you're looking for, otherwise you're going to get both. You can choose the type of process tool you're looking for. So sometimes I just search for checklists because I just want to see a list of those, or I want to make sure that I did them for the week. I usually use the save as or tell people to when they're looking for something specific. So you're looking for a specific client's name, a project, an employee's name, a customer's name. The start and end date you can use when you're looking for a specific date range. And then when you hit Run Report, you're going to see a list of all these things. This is completely checklist because that's all I was searching for. And then here I see my different processes with the checklist in them. So this process title is listed here, Daily To-Do for Sales. This is a referral process. And then you see, by date, those checklists that were completed inside of that process. If you don't choose a date range, you can see like here I'm getting all of the dates for forevermore. And usually you don't have to go back that far. So choosing a date range can be useful if you don't want to see everything. The management review section is for managers to go in and look at control panel activity in a more specific way. So a manager can always go through this section and go right to, Sam here, and then choose customer complaints, and then look at the tools here. But it's a little more like digging in, having to look for something specific or just review it. So generally, this is a faster way to do it. So I go to Management Review, and then I can call up the user. So these are all my employees here. I even see myself here just because I have a control panel for a sales position, which is technically underneath me. So I go to the specific position or person I want to look at. I can choose process tool type again, so I just want to look for checklists, save as, so all the same idea. And then you hit Run Report, and you're going to see a list of those things. This is breaking down the type of process tool. It just gives you kind of a roughly, what percentage of everything are they completing the most. So forms are completed the most, which is an obvious thing. That would be clear. So then here I see Sally, and I see, by process title, everything that she's completed. The save as will pop in right here. So you see here, this is project EDC, so she's naming the change orders that happened on these projects. This is like direct mail, so this is an example of the save as too, like sent in Q1, 2, 3. So these save as can be kind of useful because the manager can see, at a glance what this is related to. Here's like a customer complaint, so these are the checklists that have been saved, and then he's put like the person's name that had the complaint right here. Here's like contracts and proposals, so here's the name and the actual client's name that the contract was for. You can also download this to Excel. Not sure why you would do that, but you can because people have asked for it, and so that's why it's there. So you just see a list of these things that were completed in Excel. What else about this? If you want to look at all your employees, then just don't choose a user. So what I'll do at the end of the week is I'll set the date range for the week, and then I hit Run Report, and then I see everybody. And I can look and see, here's all the different employees all in one glance. I just go through and say, did they do their checklist this week? If they did, then I see it. If not, then I know I need to message them and let them know that I don't see their checklist. So just to recap, the control panel is for implementing and using of the processes for employees. And management review is for managers to ensure that processes are being used and to track and keep training information and to know when they need to retrain and train. So these two tools make processes active. If you haven't used these two tools yet, what I would recommend is that you take a simple process and start to use it in the control panel and ask your managers to use it if you have managers, even as something as simple as time management. If you've got managers in place, do a managerial thing. Have them do performance reviews in this. Have them keep one-on-one meeting notes in here with agendas. Just do one thing and kind of get them used to it. And then start to explain to them the value of managing with a process and managing their employees with a process. Thanks for coming, everybody. I've got a slew of questions, but I just noticed I'm over time. So I'll spend some time emailing people back answers to their questions. Thanks for coming, and hopefully if you want to come again, you can. Also remember, we have TouchStone University here, where you can sign up for just shorter informational classes about TouchStone. These are about 30 minutes or so, and they're kind of more high level, so you get like tips and techniques for using TouchStone at a more advanced way, so not the basics, but more advanced things you can do. So remember about TouchStone University.